Hello, Prestige heads, and welcome to American Prestige. I'm Danny Bessner, here as always with my friend and comrade, Derek Davison. And this is another one of our beautiful video episodes. We're doing one of these a week every Tuesday. We might miss one here and again, but we probably won't generally. So if you like this, please genuinely consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. I don't know where it is, but there's a subscription button on here somewhere, and do
We're,
that.
we don't know where our own YouTube channel is, but
No,
if somebody could find it for
probably
us,
on
that'd be great.
YouTube. Yeah, so just,
Yeah,
we have a lot of fans in the clavicular chat. So check,
like and
ask them.
share. Yeah,
Just ask
is
them.
the thing
Like
that
and
you're
share.
supposed to say.
Smash
Like and
that like
share.
button. And we are very excited to welcome back to the pod for the first time in a long while, but he was one of our first and one of my personal most favorite guests. I won't speak for Derek. Derek might think otherwise. And that
Huh.
is, of course, Sam Huneke. Sam's an associate professor of history at George Mason University. He's the author, most recently, of I Will Not Abandon You, Queer Women in Nazi Germany, which we're going to talk about with him on one of our regular podcast episodes. And I also want to, of course, mention that Sam was kind enough to do a very long series uh, with us toward the beginning of the show that is available to anyone who subscribes at any level, monthly or annual, that we've called Queer Germany. And it kind of doubles as a history of queerness in Central Europe, Germany specifically, and also kind of turns into a history of Nazism. So if that sounds of interest, please check that
Funny
out.
how those two things were
Yes, and
intertwined.
we might be speaking a bit more about that later. But anyway, Sam, after that preamble, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be back.
So a question that I like asking people, particularly people who we haven't had on in a while, which is like, what's your take? What's going on in the world today? What is Trump? What is MAGA? What is it going to be going forward? We were both Europeanists by training.
Yep.
And everyone's talking about that fun Gramsci quote. My stupid joke is that it assumes an inter to the regnum.
Yeah.
Maybe there is no regnum coming. But anyway, what do you think? What's your take on what's going on here?
I don't know. I mean, we're living in the stupidest of times. It is, I mean, in some sense, it gives me optimism, right? The people running the show right now are just morons. And I keep thinking, well, at least these are fascists who don't know what the hell they're doing. Um, on the other hand, I'm not sure that the Democrats know what they're doing either. So I, overall, I think Trump one gave a lot of people, uh, at least like me, a real sort of sense of urgency and purpose, and that there was a kind of public discourse that was worth intervening in, and that people had voted for Trump out of ignorance, and et cetera, et cetera. And with Trump too, there was at least initially this immense sense of resignation that people knew what they were getting when they voted for Trump again in 2024, and Trump has absolutely fulfilled his campaign promises. I mean, the stuff he's doing is absolutely what he ran on doing. For all these people who are saying, "Oh, well, I didn't vote for this. I didn't think he would do this." It's just absolute, to use a Joe Biden word, malarkey. He absolutely forecasted that this is what he was going to do. And to my mind, I keep coming back to this concern or sort of issue, which is that I think a lot of Democrats, particularly kind of centrist Democrats, want to see Trump as the problem. As a historian who studies fascism, I think that Trump is really the symptom of a set of deeper problems with our society, with the way that our economy works, with the way that our politics work. And I'm really concerned that even if Democrats get back into power this year and then again in 2 years, that they're going to sort of pull the same Biden Harris mistake of just, we're going to reach out across the aisle. We're going to treat Republicans like normal interlocutors. No major economic reforms necessary, no major political reforms necessary. So I don't know. Things aren't good.
So, what's your take on why the Democrats have been such institutional sclerosis? Because I think, if one of the famous ways that historians understand liberalism is, I think Gary Gersel put it, it's famously protean, right? This
Right.
is one of its great strengths. Why it's hard to pin down as an
Yeah.
ideology. Why it's hard to say these are the 10 things that make up liberalism
Yeah.
across time and space. But it does seem like in this current moment, liberalism's perhaps greatest political strength seems nowhere in evidence, which is to incorporate the critique, right? Like that's what it's
Right.
always been great at.
Right,
And
which
that's
is
why
why,
it's
social
hegemonic.
democracy is fundamentally a form of liberalism
Oh,
because it's
not
sort
even
of
a question. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. The New Deal in
Oh, of
American
course,
socialism
of
is
course.
liberal. Yeah. So, like, what's your understanding of, as someone who's as I have been, you more than me, but deep in the archives of a moment of political sclerosis, why have the Democrats been so unable to incorporate critique?
That's such a good question. I mean, I think a lot of it is institutional capture, right? I mean, when we sort of look at the kind of 80s onward, I think, really what drove neoliberalism was a lack of faith in institutions and government and the state to actually accomplish anything. And there were, plenty of reasonable critiques being made of the state and of unions and et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I think the Democratic Party adopted that critique kind of wholesale. I mean, right, you have people like Clinton going out and talking about, reforming the welfare state, doing away with the welfare state. Clinton is as much to blame as Republican presidents for the 2008 financial crisis. If you look at how Obama handled the financial crisis, it's absolutely captured by these sort of Wall Street banker finance McKinsey types. And at the same time, I live in DC, and there absolutely is a kind of consultant class that is at least running part of the Democratic Party, right? These are the people who kind of poll test every message, who are very reluctant to, for instance, talk about Gaza. They're very reluctant to endorse candidates like Mamdani or Abdul Al Said. And despite the fact that these are popular and strong candidates. I mean, these are people who are winning elections and actually doing a lot of good for the Democratic brand. And I think it's sort of fundamentally uh, scared political operatives who can't really see beyond what they've always known. The other kind of point I'll make is that I think in general, the Democrats have sort of become defenders of the status quo. And it's very hard to be revolutionary or think outside of the box or imagine a different, better world if you are so set on clinging to what you see as a kind of good enough option. I actually keep thinking of this SNL sketch from 2016 with Kate McKinnon playing Hillary Clinton, and she's saying, Bernie's promising you a golden goose, but I'm telling you there is no golden goose. So come with me because I have some chicken that will do. And that just is sort of encapsulates, unfortunately, the mindset of the kind of mainstream Democratic Party.
I think it's interesting that like Israel and Gaza have almost started to function as a stand-in for all of these other
Yeah.
issues in a sense. I mean, people ask why is Israel a big issue in the New York mayoral election or in a Senate race in Michigan, or why are these things?
Hmm.
Because it's a proxy for the fight
Yeah.
between this gerontocratic hierarchy that's very set in what it knows wins elections and what the American people need, which
Hmm.
is hard truths about welfare and no more free riders and all of this nonsense, and a younger generation that doesn't agree with any of that, like, doesn't see any
Hmm.
reason why any of that should be, the orthodoxy, and it's gotten sort of shorthanded, not to say that Gaza wasn't a huge wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people to see the way the Biden administration handled that, or that Israel-Palestine doesn't matter, but I think for a lot of people, it's become shorthand for this other fight between
Yeah.
almost generationally, although certainly there are, younger Democrats who are stuck in the same
And
rut.
I keep coming back. Oh, sorry.
Just
I
very quickly I think it's also become a stand-in for can you trust someone?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Which is
that's
related,
that's
sorry.
for sure. Yes, because of Biden. I mean, because the whole premise of Joe Biden was return to normalcy.
Mhm.
I can handle things. I'm a steady man at the wheel. We're going to bring back human rights. It was the first fucking thing their State Department said. We're going to bring human rights back to the center of American foreign policy. And it was all just bullshit. Like, it was all
Yeah.
just manifestly bullshit. So now people, yeah, struggle to believe any of that stuff.
And I keep coming back to something that Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a couple years ago now, that basically if you have people, mainstream Democrats, also Republicans, who won't draw the line at genocide. How on earth can we trust them to defend democracy? And so I actually do really, I think you're right. It's a proxy for can you trust these people? And even if the thing you care most about is restoring uh, kind of equality of opportunity, democracy to our country, if these are people who can't look at what's happening in Gaza and understand that this is a monstrous atrocity and do something about it, then how on earth can we trust that they are willing to do anything to help ordinary people in our country?
So, are we doing this? Are we going? Are
We're
we
doing
just
this. I
shifting
think we should
gears?
make Sam
Okay.
say it though,
We should-
uh, so we can get
Yeah,
going.
maybe we can get off scot.
In
So,
case woke
we did want to
free
talk about a particular phenomenon
Yeah.
surrounding the Trump administration that we sort of alluded to earlier when we were talking about uh, the history of queer Germany becoming kind of a history of Nazism. Sam, what do you make of the shall we say collection of characters around this administration, which is couldn't be more anti LGBTQ
Yeah.
if it tried, and yet I'll
And
leave you to fill in the yet.
yeah, and yet a bunch of them are openly gay. Right? I mean, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is an openly gay man. There's a host of these characters sort of in and around the administration. I mean, Peter Thiel, the billionaire mega donor, Palantir owner, he. I think it was the 2016 convention, sort of got up on stage and said, "I'm proud to be gay. I'm proud to be an American, and I'm proud to be a Republican." And i- it's this sort of head scratching reality, at least at first blush, right? That these are people who are, and I think what a lot of them would tell you is that they are there for the economic policies, right? These tend to be sort of privileged cisgender men, that they are there because they think the Republicans now support some limited form of gay rights, and they are maybe critical of trans rights. This is very much the kind of LGB without the T movement, which you actually see a lot more of in England. That's sort of where a lot of
It's
this is.
happened there, right? They've removed the
Yeah,
T. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
have. No, I mean, at least in terms of official kind of government policy.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And and really, what's kind of crazy, right, is that the source of a lot of this noxiousness is J.K. Rowling, and like she has made this her pet project. This is her thing. Um, but so I think a lot of the people in and around the Trump administration, that is the story they're telling themselves. There have been a couple of pieces of reporting on this. The New York Times did a big article on it maybe about a year ago. And you hear these things about how Republicans are more fun, right? You're allowed to sort of say certain
We're making
slurs.
comedy legal again. Yeah, all
Right,
this stuff. Yeah.
exactly. They're not for censorship. And then I think, of course, of like what's going on in Texas or in Florida, and I mean, literal censorship at universities. My favorite being that you can't teach Plato in Texas now because it's too gay. Uh, and um, but at the same time, so I think initially you see this and you think, what
Tough,
on
tough but fair.
earth?
That is wild. Is that true?
Yes, there was a
That is
philosophy
because there are
professor
symposiums.
at, I think, Texas A&M, who was told he
Wow.
couldn't teach Plato
That
because
is
yeah.
wild.
I
Okay,
know, and these are
sorry.
the people who want to restore
Jesus
Western
Christ.
Civ, etc. But only certain parts of it. You can read a redacted version of Plato.
Yeah, super
Yeah,
redacted.
the Plato and
I
the
mean,
Epstein
wasn't there like
files.
I vaguely remember this, but Barry Weiss's Free Speech University, the
Oh
University of
God.
Austin, didn't they like essentially try to ban the word Palestine on campus? Like, I mean,
I
like
mean,
this is free speech, you and yeah,
these are
it's that
not
kind of thing.
serious people, I think, at the end of the day. Unfortunately, they've been put in charge of our government and other kind of major cultural institutions, but they're not serious people. But so I mean, like with all these gays in and around the administration, I think at first blush you think, what on earth is going on here? But then I think the instant you kind of scratch the surface or start thinking about it, you think, oh wait, like there were gay Nazis, there have always been gay conservatives, and in fact, this sort of association we have of if you are gay, you therefore must be progressive is historically false. I mean, there's no sort of correlation between sexual preference and politics throughout most of history. That's sort of an artifact of the late 20th century in the US and a couple European countries. Um, and in fact, I think as and I, as a graduate student, maybe a decade ago, I actually wrote an article sort of predicting some of this, that if you start treating gay people like normal citizens, then they are going to start voting based on other metrics, right? And so it's not really a surprise that wealthy, white, cisgender men would start voting like, their straight peers. And not to reduce everything just to identity, but um, it isn't a surprise to me that someone like Peter Thiel would look past some of the noxiousness among conservatives and Republicans and say, yeah, this is actually kind of the party I want to align myself with. It's best for my business interests. Um, and then I also think so. I'm writing this queer history of the world right now, and it is there's a lot of unpleasantness when you get into the history of human sexuality. And I think about, the fact that we're dealing with the Epstein files and the kind of really ugly revelations that have come out of those. And I go back to what I'm writing about, ancient Greece and ancient Rome and Qing era China. And it actually is kind of a truism across history that elites do what they want, right? And even if there are laws, even if there are policies that restrict certain behaviors, the people at the top of the pyramid are they're going to take what they want. They're going to do what they want. And it's actually kind of remarkable that we live in a time where there's any measure of accountability or pushback on that.
So kind of related to that, building off the research you've done on queerness in Nazi
Mhm.
Germany, and obviously that's an analogy that many people make. So I'm just curious your thought, or for people who haven't listened to the whole
Mhm.
series yet, like why was the early Nazi movement associated with gay men? And
Yeah.
then is there anything to learn from that, or is this just like such a wildly different context that trying to understand Peter Thiel through the lens of 1928 Ernst Röhm, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. So okay. So basically, in the sort of 1920s, 1930s, you're coming out of World War One. This is also the era where sort of gay identity is first really taking shape. The word homosexuality is only coined in the 19th century. The word transvestite is coined in 1910. And there's sort of two impulses at that moment. There's the impulse towards let's define this as an attribute of a minority, let's medicalize it, let's call it homosexuality. Um, and then there's the opposite impulse, which some, in particular, conservative men have, which is actually no, everyone is sort of fundamentally bisexual. All men or most men are capable of loving relationships with both women and men, and both of these are equally important. And so you have people like Ernst Röhm, who's this Nazi. He's a soldier from World War One. They're coming back from the front. On the front, they had these intense homoerotic relationships. Maybe they were sexual, maybe they were just sort of camaraderie, but they had these intense sort of bonds with other men. And they come back into Weimar society. They are disillusioned. They are looking both for experiences that kind of recreate the experience, the social and erotic experience of the front, as well as for a politics, a party that is going to push back on everything that they think is wrong with the Weimar Republic. And they find it in parties like the Nazi Party, where they join the stormtroopers, this all male paramilitary organization. Um, and they kind of recreate to a certain extent this life on the front, where again they don't see themselves as gay or homosexual. They basically sort of see themselves, I mean, they don't necessarily call themselves this, but they see themselves as bisexual. So the fact that they have intense feelings and relationships with other men doesn't make them different. It doesn't make them part of a minority. And the most famous example of this is Ernst Röhm, who eventually rises to be the chief of the SA. He's a close personal friend of Hitler's. They both joined the party very early. And
Hitler turns out to be a fake friend though, Sam.
oh
The fakest of friends, to be honest. They have
Adolf
one of the
Hitler, a fake
fake
friend? I mean,
friends.
come on.
Can't
Like,
trust that
can you
guy.
believe anything anymore in this
And
world?
and when he takes him down, one of Röhm's last recorded statements is like, get Hitler, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
no way he knows about this type
Yeah, yeah.
something like that, yeah.
No, no, exactly. No, I mean, right, like to fast forward, eventually Rome becomes expendable, and Hitler shows up with the SS, with the sort of rival paramilitary group, and arrests Rome and all of these other SA leaders. Rome gets carted off to Dachau concentration camp, and the next day or 2 days later is sort of informed by his SS guards that he, it's been requested that he kill himself, and he says, get Hitler. No, he refuses, and then they shoot him to death. So, and what then comes out of this is Hitler. The reason that Rome is done away with has nothing to do with his sexuality. It has everything to do with the fact that the SA is sort of pushing for what they call a second revolution. Right, the Nazis are in power at this point, but they've kind of cozied up to the banks and the military and the old elite. Surprise, surprise, when far right figures run on populist platforms, they don't always enact them once they're in power. And so Rome is seen as being on this sort of, I hesitate to say leftist, but this more kind of radical fringe that is pushing for a more thorough I mean, they're
It's
still anti-Semitic.
Strasserism, right? It's like
What?
it's the Strasser brothers,
Yeah,
right?
no,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. My favorite thing. What I always tell my students is these people are called beefsteaks because they're brown on the outside but red on the inside. Right? They're both fascist, but also they have some of this communist socialist worldview in them as well. And they want the big banks and the big industries nationalized. They want to do away with the old elite and the military, which they still run. Um, Again, they're still deeply anti-Semitic. That all the racist stuff they buy into, but um, so they become a liability, and Hitler has them done away with. But then he needs an excuse, right? I mean, this is a huge purge, and it's public, and he needs an excuse. And so he goes in front of the parliament and says, well, Rome was gay, and not only was he gay, but he was planning a coup with a bunch of other gay dudes in the SA. They were a threat. And then this becomes kind of the basis of Nazi homophobia, which winds up with tens of thousands of people prosecuted, around 10,000 in concentration camps. And so, when you look at people like Scott Bessent or Peter Thiel today, you think, well, it's dangerous to make these sorts of bedfellows where there are people on the far right today who want to certainly do away with gay marriage. Some of them are talking about recriminalizing sodomy. There are even some kind of religious type people on the far right who even talk about bringing back some sort of a death penalty for queer people. So it, you know, when you sleep with leopards who want to eat your face, you might have your face eaten.
Uh, so where do you think trans identity comes into this? Because I think that has replaced
Yeah.
I think there are some obvious anti-gay people on the right, of course, but it does seem like in whatever the mainstream of the right is, even
Hmm.
though that term doesn't really make it's like transness that has been centered more
Yeah.
much more so than, homosexuality per se. So
Yeah.
what's your read on that?
It's sort of like, I mean, taking successive bites at the apple, right? So you
Hmm.
start with trans, and if if they get what they want on trans, it'll move to gay marriage. It'll move to like other things that these people want to attack. I think it's the same. It's a similar pattern that happens in terms of like reproductive rights. Right?
Hmm.
You go after abortion, and then if you get if you get what you want on abortion, then maybe birth control is the next thing up,
Hmm.
or whatever is the next obsession that the hard right has.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think there's a sort of, it's clearly cynical. I mean, right. I think Trump at one point, maybe early into his second term in office, said something in front of cameras to this effect that, a couple months before the midterm elections will bring up trans issues because that'll get people out to vote. And so it's clearly cynical, right? I mean, I think Trump personally, in particular, he's at least ostensibly friends with Caitlyn Jenner. I don't know that he really has many sort of personal beliefs in this direction, but
Friends with Donald Trump is
well, friends,
always
right? I mean,
used
is he really
loosely. Yeah.
right? But I also think it's sort of taken on a life of its own, where at one point it was about bathroom bills, and now it's become about restricting care. and the thing is, it is cynical. It's a distraction from economic issues, from um, the sort of damage being done to the foundations of our democracy, etc. But I actually haven't seen any convincing evidence that it really wins elections for these people, right? I mean, I think the vast number of voters don't really care. And if anything, I mean, I think there's sort of, it depends on which poll you look at, but there's some polls that show, okay, yeah, a majority of Americans want some restrictions on trans participation in sports. I think that for some Americans, at least based on what they've been reading, it's hard to wrap their heads around it. I think there's a lot that could be said there. But most Americans also want trans people to be able to live lives of dignity without being bullied by the state, basically. That also comes through in the polls. And so it's not clear to me that this cynical strategy is actually paying any dividends. And yet it has become such a fascination for the right in a way that, again, sort of in a similar way that homosexuality became a fascination for the Nazis, where you think this is a kind of animus that's taking on a life of its own, and it's not really serving any kind of purpose at this point. And so I don't know. I mean, I hope it's something that'll kind of die out. But I mean, looking
Do you,
again at how things have gone in England, I'm not at all convinced that it will.
do you think? I mean, speaking of things that have become shorthand for other things, do you think it's become shorthand for like woke? In
Yes.
some
Yeah.
sense. And
Hmm.
so, like, the idea is you talk about trans, but what you really mean is like these annoying professional liberals who always want to police your speech and want to tell you, what words you're allowed to use and what words you're not allowed to use. Like, just this general class of people that, is off putting to a segment of people who tend to vote Republican.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It is sort of a shorthand for woke. And, listen, I think we all know a person or two who was sort of really annoying about language in like 2020. I think AOC recently said in an interview, woke one was crazy. And yeah, I mean, sure, whatever. It there were annoying elements to it, but
Like, is this really the worst thing that's happening in your life? That somebody's telling you you can't use a word, or like somebody's scolding you for something you said? Like, is that really the worst thing that's
Well, I
happened
think
to
what
you?
freaks out the Democrats is that they them ad.
yes.
I think that this has become like a totem,
Mm,
and so, like, I don't know, that's actually the question I was gonna get to wrap up here, because, like, the Democrats have also been ambivalent at best about trans issues, and
yeah.
I think there's this reading that, like, one of the reasons Trump won was that a Michigan ad? I forget where, but it was like
Yeah.
Kamala, like, "Trump is for you and Kamala is for they, them."
Yeah.
And so that's been sort of, like, imbibed by the Democratic consulting class you mentioned earlier,
But
Sam. Yeah.
again, like it to my like I agree. I watched that ad when it, was airing. It was a very effective ad. Again, I haven't seen any numbers to actually say that it swayed the election one way or another, but it certainly, anecdotally seems like it was a very effective ad. But to my mind, the problem is that Kamala didn't believe in anything, right? She was this bland milquetoast centrist who had flip-flopped on just about every issue imaginable. Again, I remember tuning in to the debate between her and Trump. I was driving home from teaching a late night class, and I tune in the middle, right as she is saying something to the effect of, under my administration, Israel will always have lethal force at its disposal. And I just thought, oh, great, we're losing the election. Like, if that is how you are approaching this issue, we're losing this election. And so again, to my mind, yeah, this was a powerful attack, not so much because Kamala was this great champion for trans rights, which I don't think she really was, but because she didn't stand for
Right,
anything.
and
And
it's the update of the Hillary Clinton line, like, regulating the banks won't end racism. They don't wanna touch the 2 things, which is the economy and foreign policy. So
yeah,
they're going to be looking for reasons not to touch those 2 things, and ending
yeah,
the banks, whatever, regulating the banks won't end racism, and the reason we lost the election is because the Democrats were too soft toward trans people, is a perfect way to do that. So there's this, like, combination between the 2 political parties on these
mhm,
issues that are, like, frankly, like, not of central concern to most voters, then making
no,
it like the center of our never-ending culture war, which is basically, we all know, just a distraction
of
from
course,
the economy
yeah.
and foreign policy and where the money goes and how Americans rule the world.
I think the way that this gets talked about is also important. Like, I mean, I understand. the constraints that a woman running for president faces in having to seem tough, like she's not going to want to, go shopping with our enemies or whatever stereotype is going to be thrown around. Like, there's a need to sort of project, like, I'll be just as tough and muscular as all
Mhm.
these men when it comes to the military. But when you say things like, and she didn't just say this with respect to Israel, she said it with respect to the United States. Under my administration, America will have the most lethal military
Mhm.
in the world. Like, why? Why do we want that? Like, why is that a good thing? And it's the way Pete Hegseth talks about this
Mhm.
shit. And Pete Hegseth's a clown.
Yeah.
Like, why are we using this kind of language instead of just saying, look, we're going to have a military. It's going to, protect America. We're going to do what needs to be done for the defense of the country. No, we're going to have the most lethal military in the world. Nobody really gets
But
juiced up by that language.
it goes back to this sort of, I mean, I really feel like so many of these people are like living in the 90s or even in the Cold War, right? And it is not a priority for most voters on either side that we have a super lethal military that's going to go and bomb other countries or kidnap other countries' leaders. I mean, it just
I mean, what
it
does that even mean? Like, we have a military that can blow up an elementary school. Wow, that's really lethal. Great, good job,
An
guys. Like,
AI-based
that's what
military.
everybody wants. Yeah,
oh god, we
like,
haven't even talked about
why
AI.
is
Yeah.
this? Yeah, uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it just it I completely agree with you. And so I think, to go back to trans issues, I think they'll keep, pulling it out of the closet when they're worried about losing elections.
I
But
like what you did there, Sam. That's good wordplay. That's why we have you on.
uh but I don't know. I'm not convinced, I'm not convinced that it actually wins any elections for anyone. And in the meantime, you have a tiny minority of people who already have incredibly difficult lives basically becoming political punching bags. And it's I don't know. It's kind of revolting.
Well, revolting
Can
is the
I?
place. Oh, Derek, you want
Well,
one
can
more?
I can
Or
I
go,
ask one
go.
more question? This is unrelated to anything except we talked about him earlier, Sam and Danny as well. Do you guys find it odd that Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, is constantly telling people he's going to get in fistfights with them?
Yeah,
Like,
he
I
seems
find
it's
to
it
very
cool. By
strange.
odd, you mean
Had
cool.
that shouting match with Elon Musk, and
yeah.
like he supposedly told Bill Pulte he was going to kick his ass. Like,
I
what
wonder
is
if
going
this
on
comes
there?
from a kind of internalized same sort of
Yeah,
the same thing as
absolutely. Masculinity, for
yeah,
sure. Yeah,
like
sorry, Sam. Yeah.
you're gay, you're in this space where people kind of look down on queer people, and so you need to prove your masculinity. I mean, it's right. It's the exact same thing as Kamala Harris talking about a lethal military.
Okay, I'm glad I
Yeah,
asked. That
I
clarifies
think
things
that's
for me. Thank you.
precisely right. Well, I always like ending on people who first four letters of their last name are the same as mine. So that's a good place to end. Sam, thank you so much. We'll have you back soon to
Yeah,
talk about your recent book. And it was great seeing you again, man.
yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.